The metal detector shrieked like a wounded animal. Heads turned. Conversations halted. Even the towering digital clock above the Justice Department lobby froze in the corner of Mira Chen's eye. She paused mid-step, her worn boots clicking awkwardly against the marble as the red light flashed. A young security officer stepped forward, hand outstretched. "Ma'am, step aside. Bag 2. Mira tightened her grip on the canvas duffel strapped across her shoulder. "It's just cleaning equipment," she said softly. The officer raised an eyebrow, signaling to a second guard who, for reasons that would become clear too late, relished drama more than protocol. "Cleaning equipment," he repeated with a smirk, loud enough to draw murmurs from the line forming behind her. "That what they're calling it now?" Mira glanced around. Lobby cameras blinked in their metal nests. A few visitors already had their phones out, eager to capture another incident. The world was always hungry for shame. "I'm part of facilities. 3rd floor," she said. Her voice was even, controlled. "You've set off the scanner 3 times. That bag's not going through until it's opened." She hesitated. Not out of guilt, never that, but because she could feel it happening already. The narrative was forming, invisible and inevitable. A man in a pinstripe suit 2 people back called out, "Just open the damn bag, sweetheart. Some of us have real jobs to get to." Laughter snaked through the lobby. Mira stood still. Her eyes didn't flinch, but inside, her chest burned. Another security staffer appeared, older, meaner, with a buzz cut and an ego forged from years of unchecked authority. The name tag read Est. Grady. He stopped in front of her, took one look at her dark cargo pants, faded janitor badge, and frizzy bun, then addressed the room, not her. "This again? You all right, miss?" "Chen. Mira Chen. Miss Chen." He smiled without humor. "You've made quite the impression this morning. Let's not hold up federal business for your mop water. Open it." He didn't wait for her to comply, just reached forward. She stepped back. "With all due respect, I'd prefer." "Oh, with all due respect," Grady mimicked, loud and nasal, earning another round of chuckles. "Do you see this line? Half of Capitol Hill's walking through that door today. This is a secure facility. You don't get to prefer anything." Someone near the back began recording. Mira spotted the glowing red dot on the screen. A woman whispered, "What's in the bag?" Another voice added, "I think she's one of those protesters from last week." Myra's fingers curled into fists. "I'm not." Grady didn't care. "Here's what I think," he said, circling her now like a predator with a microphone. "I think this isn't about a mop. I think you walked in here wanting attention. And now you've got it." Her cheeks flushed, not with shame but heat. That righteous, white-hot heat that begged to rise. But she forced it down. Now was not the time. The duffel sat like a deadweight on her shoulder. Every part of her screamed not yet, but he kept going. "People like you walk around with chips on their shoulder the size of this damn building. Always the victim. Always misunderstood. Tell me, Miss Chun, should we call someone to help interpret your trauma before we check the bag?" A hush swept the room. Even the crowd sensed he'd gone too far. Mira exhaled. "You can check the bag," she said finally, setting it down slowly. "But I recommend you do it carefully." Grady laughed. "Ooh, we've got ourselves a James Bond villain." His gloved hands hovered over the zipper. "Let's see what the revolution looks like, shall we, Grady?" The young guard from earlier whispered, glancing at the security monitor. "Maybe we should wait for—" "Shut up, Owens." And then Grady yanked the zipper. The sound, teeth of metal pulled apart, was louder than it should have been. Felt obscene. The bag opened. A cold silence cracked through the lobby like glass under pressure. Something inside shifted, then rolled. Thud. A rectangular black case hit the floor. Then a second. Then a third. A badge, not hers, slid across the polished marble, the lanyard still stained dark red. A silver hard drive gleamed beneath it, labeled in sharp, clinical print. "Property of DOJ, classified." Someone gasped. Grady's bravado evaporated. He crouched, picked up one of the cases. His face paled. "No." No, this can't be. The phone stopped recording. People stopped breathing. Mira didn't move, didn't blink. She simply said, loud enough for all to hear, "Now you want to listen." If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. 1 year ago, Washington, D.C., 3rd Subbasement, Division 17 Cyber Intelligence Branch. The hum of servers was the only sound in the room, like a distant hive full of secrets. Mira-chan sat alone at her terminal, bathed in sterile light, eyes scanning lines of data that blinked across 3 curved monitors. She blinked twice, then stopped. Her fingers hovered. The air conditioning vent above her rattled softly. A blinking packet on her screen had rerouted through a blacklisted node. An IP string tied to an internal server, buried under 6 layers of encryption. Marked DOJ internal red level. She opened it and froze. The document inside wasn't formatted like normal logs. It was raw, uncompiled, as though never meant to be seen outside its original machine. The words Project Cataclysm appeared in jagged, unstyled font across the top. Below it, lists, dates, names, medical records, human trial logs. "No way," she whispered. Her pulse kicked in her ears. She opened a few of the linked data paths. Subject A17, deemed unstable post-procedure. Erased. Subject F09, leaked details. Relocated. Accident filed. Each entry was like a punch to the ribs. People had died, been made to disappear, and the ones responsible were listed in code names she recognized. LZ73, SAN PR6, D17, overseas. Politicians, department heads, her own boss. A sticky note on the corner of her monitor fluttered as the vent blew harder. Her hand shook as she copied the logs onto a cold drive. She triple encrypted it, labeled it something innocuous, Shift_logs_Q1, and tucked it into her pocket. That was the first day Mira stopped trusting anyone above her. 2 days later, "You accessed restricted logs you weren't cleared for." Deputy Director Ellen Tarsis didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her presence was enough. Impeccably tailored gray suit, cold, burnt coffee eyes. 2 armed escorts stood behind her in the server room. Mira stood with her hands clenched in front of her, her terminal locked behind her. "The logs were flagged by our intrusion system. I followed protocol. They were firewalled for a reason. They contained classified experiments on U.S. citizens. Dead citizens. What reason is worth hiding that?" Ellen stared at her for a beat. "You've always been meticulous, Miss Chun. Quiet, careful, reliable. But you're not irreplaceable." Mira felt the floor shift. "They'll erase you," she whispered. "We already have." 2 weeks later, her badge didn't work. The security gate at the Metro lab blinked red. She swiped again. Red. "Ma'am?" the guard asked. "Can I help you?" "I work here," she said, pulling out her ID. But the name on his screen showed terminated access. Within minutes, she was escorted out. No box of belongings. No HR rep. Just a sterile hallway full of people she used to sit next to, avoiding her gaze. By the time she got home, her department email was gone. Her phone disconnected from the work network. Even her LinkedIn had been scrubbed. Every place she'd worked or interned, gone. 1 month later, Mira applied to 17 jobs. Each one ghosted her. A friend from school messaged her, "Hey, are you okay? Heard something bad happened?" Like a breakdown. Rumors. Spread by people who knew better, or who were told not to know. She stared at her laptop. Unpaid bills. Denied unemployment. No insurance. Even her apartment lease was suddenly up for renegotiation. She was becoming a ghost. 3 months later, the uniform didn't quite fit. The blue jumpsuit was too long in the sleeves, and the ID badge for Facility Custodial Services Contractor hung crooked from her belt loop. The DOJ building was loud, arrogant, full of powerful people who never looked janitors in the eye. That was her advantage. The mop was just a prop. The closet was just a base. The silence, that was hers to wield now. Every day she watched them, collected copies, saw what they shredded, what they whispered, what they assumed no one would notice. She knew where the cameras blinked, where they didn't, where the VIPs parked, who they fired and who they paid to disappear. One day she saw a box labeled Archive, Cataclysm Proof, not to be moved. She made a copy, the second drive, present-day moments before the bag. As she moved through the lobby that morning, Mira felt the weight of both drives against her ribs beneath the duffel lining. Every item in the bag had a purpose. The badge, stained in blood, once worn by the whistleblower she failed to protect. The hard drive with a kill switch built in, but coded to unlock in public. A red folder marked Confidential, for eyes that dare. This wasn't about getting her job back, or exposing a few bad apples. This was about making sure the silence stopped. They buried her with rumors. She would bury them with proof. And they would open that bag not because she begged, but because they couldn't help themselves. 6:08 a.m. The Department of Justice building loomed under a storm-colored sky. The city hadn't quite woken, but Mira had been awake for hours. She stood alone at the rear service entrance, duffel bag on her back, ID badge clipped to her collar, and a chill riding up her spine. A few clouds above rolled like bruises, heavy with the promise of rain or something worse. The man at the gate barely looked up. "Chun Facilities," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Not today." The gate buzzed. She entered. The marble floor gleamed under her boots as she moved through the lower corridors. The DOJ lobby upstairs was already coming alive. Staff arriving early, the hum of coffee machines, the scent of too much cologne and not enough truth. Today was no ordinary day. Mira had chosen it with purpose. A joint congressional briefing upstairs, 3 cabinet officials scheduled to attend, and a press presence thick enough to suffocate a lie if it got too close. The perfect audience. Her route was memorized. The service elevator. The supply closet. The circuit panel that hadn't been updated since 1998. Each step timed to the minute. Inside the closet, she placed the duffel bag on the shelf and opened it. She checked each item. The classified folder, creased from so many readings it felt like scripture. The hard drive, wrapped in a cloth with the words, "Debt Paid" scribbled in Sharpie. The ID badge from Agent Lara Wynn, her friend, found dead in her car with the crash filed as mechanical error. And finally, the old security camera chip, the one that showed who had walked into that basement lab the night Subject A17 died. It wasn't a technician. It was a senator. She swallowed. "Not yet," she whispered to herself. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the weight of carrying this silence for too long. 7:22 a.m. She emerged from the elevator just as the lobby started to bustle. Senator Horace Lynn swept in, flanked by his aides like royalty. People straightened as he passed, trying to be seen or worse, trying not to be. Mira knew his face better than most. It was on 2 of the documents in her folder. He'd signed the approval for the experiments, then sat on the panel that discredited Lara's death. He glanced at her without seeing her. She gripped the strap of her bag tighter. The hallway to the hearing room was already under restricted security. She wasn't going up there. That wasn't her battlefield. The truth needed to be revealed where it couldn't be ignored. Not behind closed doors, but here, in the lobby, in front of everyone. 7:46 a.m. Her earpiece buzzed, a leftover from her tech days, still functional with a private signal she'd patched into the lobby's passive sensor system. The alert tone meant cameras were live. Media had arrived. She moved slowly to the front checkpoint, the duffel bouncing against her hip. The line was longer now. Dozens of DOJ employees, legal interns, press staff, and VIP guests swarming like bees in suits. A guard, not Grady, gave her a look. "You can't go through this entrance. Service staff goes around." "I have clearance today," she said, tapping the new laminated pass she printed herself last night. A nearly perfect replica of a DOJ contractor access badge, slightly smudged in the corner to avoid too close a glance. He waved her through. 7:59 a.m. Mira stood by the turnstile, watching the chaos of officialdom swirl. She spotted one of the press staff from a left-leaning network, a young woman with a tablet and a twitchy smile. Mira walked past her slowly, dropped something at her feet. The reporter bent to pick it up, a small USB drive. A label on it in neat handwriting. Ask about Project Cataclysm. Check file #A17. Mira didn't look back. She walked into the crowd. 8:05 a.m. She took her place in line at the main scanner. Her bag, heavy but harmless looking, rested at her feet. She could already feel the first glances. Some people stared because she looked out of place, a janitor in the line of suits. Others just sensed something was off. Maybe it was the quiet fire in her eyes. Maybe it was fate finally tipping. She saw him again. Grady, the smug security chief, already grumbling at someone about a disruption on the mezzanine. Her stomach coiled. She had rehearsed the moment 100 times. Then she heard it, the scanner buzz, the high-pitched shriek. She didn't flinch. Grady turned and saw her. His eyes narrowed, voice barking, "Her again!" The crowd grew restless. Phones lifted. Here it comes. The part where they try to belittle her. The part where they accuse. The part where they laugh. Not because they're cruel, but because they can't imagine she could matter. But they don't know what's in the bag. Not yet. Mira turned slowly to face the security checkpoint, unzipping her coat as the tension began to swell around her. The lobby was alive with judgment, with power, with eyes, and soon with the truth. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The trap was set. The moment had begun. The silence, the one that had lasted a year, was about to be broken. 8:08 a.m. The scanner buzzed again. Louder this time. Mira didn't blink. The red light pulsed above her like a warning from some divine source. Her duffel bag rested on the conveyor belt. Unopened. Suspicious. Heavy. Grady's voice cut through the rising noise like a serrated blade. "I knew it," he muttered, stalking toward her. "Get her aside. Now." Two younger guards rushed forward. One motioned awkwardly. "Miss, just step this way for a moment?" Mira said nothing. She followed, walking with calm, calculated steps to the inspection table off to the side, where a few stanchions cordoned off the space. Not private, just visible enough for humiliation. Phones rose again. Whispers fluttered across the polished marble like feathers from a burst pillow. "Did she bring a bomb? I heard she was arrested once. Is she even allowed in here? Somebody call the FBI." A low murmur, shapeless and growing. Grady leaned over the table, arms folded, jaw tight. "Care to explain what you're carrying this morning, Miss Chun? Was it?" Mira finally spoke. "You already know my name." That poked something in him. He chuckled, dry, bitter. "What I know is this building runs on trust, on order, and I've seen your type. Quiet, invisible, always lurking with a chip on your shoulder. You don't know anything about me." Grady nodded toward her bag. "Then enlighten us. What's in the bag?" Mira tilted her head. "Truth." More chuckles from nearby agents. One woman at a desk muttered, "Jesus, here we go." Grady didn't smile. "That's cute. But you're standing in a federal building with an unregistered device, a restricted clearance, and a very bad attitude. So unless you want to be zip-tied to the floor, you're going to open that bag. Now." She looked at him. Not the way a threat does, but the way a storm looks at a town. "I suggest," she said quietly, "you open it." "Oh no, not a chance." He turned to the crowd, his voice rising as he gestured toward the bag. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a mystery. Some rogue staffer thinks she's the main character today." The lobby now held at least 70 people. Some DOJ staff, some press, a few suited senators being ushered through alternate paths by concerned aides. But many stayed, intrigued. A cluster of reporters hovered by the velvet ropes, cameras low but rolling. Grady's voice sharpened. "You think waving around a janitor badge gives you power? You think you're above protocol?" "I think," Mira said, "your time for protocol is running out." Grady raised a hand to a nearby officer. "Bring the scanner wand." The officer returned a moment later. Handheld scanner in shaking grip. He swept it over the bag. It wailed in protest. Grady tensed. Step back. He glanced at the bag. Then at Mira. Final chance. She took a breath. Deep, centered. And then said the words that would make everything spiral. Go ahead. Open it. That stopped him. Somewhere in the back, a woman gasped. A phone slipped from a hand and cracked on the floor. And Mira knew. She felt it shift. The moment when the audience realized this wasn't a prank, or a tantrum, or a publicity stunt. This was a reckoning. Grady's jaw clenched. His ego warred with his instincts. But the cameras were rolling, and there was no way he'd back down now. He yanked the zipper. Zhhhhhht. The sound ripped through the lobby. Silence fell. One item dropped to the table. A blood-stained government ID badge. The name, Win, Lara. Agent 1123A. Status, deceased. Cause, vehicular malfunction. Grady's hand hovered. Another item slid out. A silver hard drive, marked with red paint. No label, no barcode. Just a slash of color like a warning. Then a black folder with a red band around it. Stamped. Project Cataclysm. Classified eyes only. Severe penalties for unauthorized viewing. Phones snapped upward. Reporters surged closer. A young woman from Channel 6 shouted, "Where did that come from? Is that real?" Grady took an unconscious step back. His confidence cracked. This is fake. This is a hoax. But a senior DOJ staffer, someone who recognized the badge, stepped forward. His face drained of color. That's Lara Wins. She was assigned to R&D oversight. She died, someone whispered. No, Mira said. She was killed. The air thinned. A single bead of sweat rolled down Grady's temple. He looked at Mira, something desperate in his eyes now. Where did you get this? Mira finally let the rage edge into her voice. You erased me. You buried her. You thought I'd stay quiet. She leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting. You made one mistake. You let me back in. A ripple of understanding passed through the crowd. And suddenly Mira wasn't the threat. She was the witness. Grady's hand dropped from his sidearm. He stepped away from the bag, no longer in control, no longer sure who he was in this story. The cameras turned to Mira. She met them. 8:12 a.m. The bag sat wide open on the inspection table, its contents scattered like landmines, objects too ordinary in shape to be immediately terrifying, yet too precisely arranged to be anything but deliberate. Lara Wynn's blood-stained badge still lay at the center. The red-soaked edge of the lanyard curled like a dead flower. The black folder rested next to it. Thick, untouched. The hard drive, dull silver and silent, looked almost small in contrast. But to anyone who'd ever worked inside the DOJ, it radiated danger, because no drive like that traveled unescorted, let alone unsecured. And Mira stood silently behind the table, her hands folded, the picture of control. Grady no longer barked orders. He didn't speak at all. The color had drained from his face, replaced by a kind of haunted tension. The brash security chief now looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff he didn't realize was real until the wind hit him. All around, the crowd pressed in. Phones still recorded, but with reverence now. Journalists whispered to each other with the urgency of war reporters. Even the VIPs in the upper mezzanine had paused mid-step. A voice broke the silence. Is that cataclysm? It came from a senior policy advisor standing behind the checkpoint glass. His voice trembled, half disbelieving, half horrified. He looked about 60, clean suit, trembling hand over his mouth. I thought that project was decommissioned, someone whispered. No, it was buried. Erased, Mira corrected them softly. Grady finally found his voice. This doesn't prove anything. He said it too quickly, too loudly, like someone trying to say it before reality could. Mira stepped forward. Slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Open the folder. The press surged forward. One woman in a navy blazer raised her press badge. We're live with DC now. Ms. Chun. What's in the folder? Mira didn't look at the camera. She looked at the man behind the glass. The one who'd whispered the project's name like it was a curse. You know, she said to him, you signed clearance on it. You passed it through subcommittee in 2021 under a different name. Do you remember what you called it? Social Threat Containment Initiative. STCI. The man froze. Grady barked again. You're not cleared to disclose. Neither were the test subjects. She cut in. You stripped their names. Labeled them as threats. The youngest was 12. You sedated them and called it patriotism. Gasps echoed in waves. Someone stepped up to the table. A woman in her 40s. Glasses, press badge, trembling hand. Opened the folder. And the silence that followed was worse than any scream. Inside were photos, medical charts, field logs, audio transcripts, experiment notes. Subject A17 displayed cognitive enhancement under stimulus but deteriorated after phase 3. Applied protocol gamma. Terminated. Files sealed. Audio clip transcription. Voice 1. Shouldn't we report this? Voice 2. Not if you want to keep your pension. Voice 1. But the kid, he's not stable. He's begging. Voice 2. Then turn off the feed. The folder trembled in the journalist's hands. Another reporter whispered, This is real. Mira nodded. Project Cataclysm was never about national defense. It was a political scalpel, designed to weaponize people, then erase them if they leaked. Grady tried to speak. Myra's voice crushed him. You buried what you couldn't control. Another voice joined the fray, a sharp, professional tone from the upper balcony. That's enough. All eyes turned. A woman in a gray suit descended the staircase, Senator Margot Reeves, chair of the Oversight Ethics Committee. Her face was stone, her steps deliberate. She reached the checkpoint, looked at the evidence, then at Mira. You're Chun, she said, the analyst who vanished. I was buried. Reeves gave a slow, grim nod. I read Lara Wynn's reports. She said someone else was helping her collect the logs. She met Myra's eyes. It was you. Mira didn't confirm, didn't deny. Instead, she reached into the bag one last time and held up a second drive. This one had a different label, failsafe, live stream backup. She handed it to the Channel 6 reporter. Play it. A hush. Then the sound of static as the reporter plugged it into a portable hub. The video started. A hidden security feed. A hallway, dimly lit. A teenager strapped to a gurney. Two officials walking past, their faces visible. One of them, unmistakably, was Senator Lynn. The boy screamed, Please, please don't let them. The second official turned toward the camera, pulled a plug. The screen cut to black. In the lobby, reality collapsed. Senator Lynn, halfway up the stairs, went white. That video is doctored, he shouted. I've never. No, said the man behind the glass. That's your voice, Lynn. Mira stood motionless. Her eyes, clear, unflinching, found the center of the crowd. You erased me to protect this. You killed my colleague. You turned children into weapons. She stepped away from the table. And then, as if by some unspoken signal, every phone began to buzz. Hashtag Project Cataclysm. Hashtag Truthunzipped. Hashtag Justice for Lara. The world was watching. 8:17 a.m. For a moment, there was no sound, no shouting, no accusations, not even the soft clatter of boots on marble. Just silence. Thick, breathless silence. The lobby of the Department of Justice, once filled with morning chaos, had become a cathedral of disbelief. The video still played in the reporter's hands, looping silently now. The teenager's screams, the senator's face, the moment the feed was cut. A frozen testament to a truth too awful to deny. Mira didn't speak. She didn't have to anymore. Her words had done their damage. The evidence had finished the rest. Grady had stepped back so far he was nearly behind the scanner. His hands, once so confident, hung useless at his sides. His jaw worked soundlessly, trying to summon the arrogance to spin this, to downplay it, to smirk it away, but he couldn't. He wasn't the center anymore. She was. Senator Lin was halfway up the stairs when the weight of 100 eyes made him stop. Aide at his side, phone in hand, already whispering desperate instructions. Get ahead of it. Deny everything. Call legal. Call News Nation. Get a statement out now. But no one was listening to him. No one cared what he said anymore. All eyes had shifted to Mira. The crowd, once amused by the crazy janitor with a big mouth, was now caught in something closer to awe. Even the press, for all their cynicism, stood there stunned. There were no questions shouted. No rush forward. Just stunned, reverent silence. The woman with the navy blazer from Channel 6 broke it first. Not with a shout, but with a whisper. Who are you? Mira turned toward her slowly. Her voice was steady, not triumphant, not angry, just done. I was one of you, she said. Until they erased me. Another journalist murmured. You had all this. Why now? Myra's eyes flicked to the cameras, the marble, the watchful upper gallery where the most powerful people in the city had frozen mid-step. Because now, she said. You're finally watching. Senator Reeves, still standing near the checkpoint, cleared her throat. The sound felt loud. Real. I want every file she just released secured for evidence. She turned to her aide. And tell oversight to cancel the briefing. This is the briefing now. Reporters began to move again. Cautiously, reverently. Microphones lifted. I stayed on Mira. I have a statement to give, Reeves announced, but still. No one moved to her. Not yet. The moment still belonged to Mira. And Mira let it stretch. She turned slowly, letting herself look at the entire lobby. At the polished glass, the people in pressed suits who used to rush past her like she didn't exist. At the camera lens now transmitting her silence to millions. Her hands were calm at her sides. Her shoulders no longer slouched. She wasn't the woman they laughed at. Not the invisible worker they pushed past. Not the whistleblower they smeared. She was the reckoning. And in that still, breathless space she could feel it, not just vindication. Not just exposure. Power. Real, earned, unshakable power. Not because she shouted. Not because she demanded it. But because they saw her now. They saw what she carried. What she risked. What she lost. And what she never gave up. Grady stepped forward at last, looking pale. I didn't know what you were carrying. Mira met his eyes. That was the problem. You never even looked. He opened his mouth again, but no words came out. 8:22 a.m. Agents from Oversight's emergency compliance team had entered the building now. They were already taking statements. A man in a dark blue suit gently took the folder from the reporter and handed Mira a printed acknowledgement. Evidence received. She didn't look at it. She didn't need a signature to confirm what had just happened. Ms. Chun, someone said behind her. Can we ask you some questions? A dozen microphones pointed at her. She didn't answer. She just nodded. Senator Reeves stepped closer. I believe the nation owes you an apology. Mira raised an eyebrow. It doesn't matter what they owe me. It matters what they do next. Reeves nodded solemnly. You'll be protected. That's a promise. Mira didn't nod. Didn't thank her. She wasn't here for promises. She was here to end the silence. And she had. 8:26 a.m. Outside the DOJ building, the sidewalks swarmed with news crews. Protesters were already forming. Hashtags were trending. Government social media accounts went dark. Inside, Mira sat on a bench just outside the security perimeter, flanked by two quiet compliance officers. A younger DOJ intern walked past, slowed, then turned back. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, I saw the stream. What you did. He faltered. Thank you. Mira looked up. She didn't smile, but her voice was gentle. Then don't forget it. 2 days later, Washington, D.C., National Newsroom broadcast. The anchor looked directly into the camera, brows knit with somber weight. And in a rare bipartisan move, Congress has launched an immediate investigation into the now-exposed Project Cataclysm, following whistleblower Mira Chen's public release of classified files that implicate multiple senior officials in experimental human trials. Protests continue across 23 states, demanding accountability for what many are calling the largest government cover-up of the decade. Mira muted the television. She sat in a plain hotel room, walls beige, carpet patterned in quiet grays, the kind of place meant to be invisible. She hadn't slept much. Across from her, Special Investigator Janice Holloway sat with a government-issued notepad on her lap and a guarded expression behind her glasses. "You've upended half of Capitol Hill, Ms. Chen," she said. "Some would call that heroic. Others call it inconvenient," Mira finished. Janice didn't argue. The silence hung for a moment, heavy with the things left unsaid. Janice scribbled a few lines in her notebook, then asked, "Have you decided what you want next? Protection? Asylum? Testimony?" "I'm not running." "Then you'll need a lawyer." "I have documents. Originals. Hard copies. Enough to take down everyone who greenlit those experiments." Janice nodded slowly. "You're holding power now, Ms. Chun. You can use it, or you can trade it." Mira looked at her hands, calloused from a year of manual labor, steady from a lifetime of quiet diligence. "I didn't come this far to bargain," she said. "I came to finish what Lara started." That night, online, hashtags flooded every major platform. Hashtag Project Cataclysm. Hashtag Justice for A17. Hashtag Mirachin. Hashtag The Erased. Comment threads overflowed. "She was just a janitor. Imagine being so brave when everyone dismissed you. We need people like her in government, not the cowards who tried to bury her." "I worked in DOJ. I saw the reports back then. We were told to ignore it." "I'm sorry, Mira." And then, somewhere between the rage and reverence, came the paranoia. What if she's lying? This is going to destabilize everything. Be careful what truth you cheer for. How do we know she isn't being used by someone else? The truth was out. But trust? That would take longer. 4 days later, Senate ethics hearing. Cameras snapped as Senator Horace Lynn was escorted into a closed-door hearing. Mira didn't attend. She didn't need to. The proof was already in the public record. But she watched the stream from a safe room, expression unreadable, arms crossed as the man who once funded secret tests on children now faced reporters screaming for answers. The same man who had looked through her for years now couldn't escape her shadow. "Senator Lynn, what do you say to the allegations? Did you authorize experimentation on minors? Do you deny that's your voice in the footage?" His silence screamed louder than any denial. Later that week, DOJ press conference. Senator Reeves stood at the podium, Mira beside her. The room packed with journalists, the moment broadcast live across the country. "We are here," Reeves said, "because a woman who had every reason to stay silent chose to speak." She turned to Mira. "Ms. Chun, we recognize your courage and your service. You've reminded this nation that truth does not always come from those in power, but from those they try to erase." The applause was subdued, reverent. Mira stepped forward. She didn't have a speech, just one sentence. "You watched it fall out of my bag. Now do something with it." Then she turned and walked away from the podium. 1 week later, a small office in Virginia. A new logo shined on the door, the Silent Witness Initiative. Mira stood in the bare office with 2 laptops, a printer, and a wall lined with empty corkboards. The room smelled like paint and paper. A woman stepped in, the reporter from Channel 6, the one who first played The Drive. "You're really doing it," she said. Mira nodded. "People need a place to go. Somewhere the truth doesn't disappear behind glass doors. Whistleblower advocacy? Accountability infrastructure. You'll be their enemy now, you know. The systems. You're not invisible anymore." Mira looked at her, her eyes steady. "Good." Late that night, final scene. The streets outside were dark and quiet. A storm gathered above the city. Fitting, Mira thought. She sat by the window. A single lamp illuminated the table. In front of her lay the last artifact from the bag. Lara Wynn's badge. Not a trophy. A reminder. Mira whispered to it, not for sentiment, but for resolution. You didn't die for nothing. Her phone buzzed. A notification. Anonymous submission received. Potential whistleblower. Homeland Security. Subject line. They're doing it again. Mira stared at it, then stood, and smiled. 3 weeks later. Capitol Hill. Mira stood at the edge of the rotunda, far from the podium where a stream of polished speakers praised her. Behind her, a crowd of staffers, reform advocates, whistleblowers, and young volunteers filled the marble chamber. Above them, skylights bathed the room in pale, wintry light. Senator Reeves was giving a speech formal, practiced, meaningful in a way that sounded expensive. Let the record reflect, Reeves said into the microphone, that without Ms. Chen's courage, the truth about Project Cataclysm would never have reached the light. She reminded this nation that the most powerful testimony often comes from the quietest voices. Applause. Mira didn't step forward. Not right away. She looked down at the folded document in her hands, the Presidential Citation of Civilian Valor. Neatly embossed. Her name spelled right. Signed by someone who hadn't known she existed until 3 weeks ago. She tucked it into her bag without ceremony. Outside, 12:41 p.m. A dozen microphones waited. Cameras blinked like curious eyes. Reporters crowded close. Ms. Chen, are you joining politics? Will you press charges? Are you afraid of retaliation? What's your next move? Mira stepped up to the line. Calm. Unrushed. My next move, she said. I'm building something. The reporters leaned in. A space where silence is no longer useful. A place where those who are afraid can be heard. One journalist called out, "Why not take office?" Mira paused. Faint smile. Because they'd try to own me, and I've already been erased once. Never again. She turned away from the podium. The press surged for another question, but she didn't stop. She was no longer an event. She was a movement. 1 month later, inside the Silent Witness Initiative headquarters, the walls were no longer bare. Pinned documents, redacted reports, post-it trails, and photos from whistleblowers lined the space like a living archive. Volunteers filled folding chairs, each one young, fierce-eyed, typing, scanning, organizing. A war room without bullets. Mira stood in front of a corkboard with dozens of names. Some had red pins beside them, confirmed victims. Others had green pins, living witnesses protected now. She stared at a photo of subject A17. A boy with tired eyes and a hospital bracelet. Beside it hung a photo of Agent Lara Wynn. They looked back at her like unfinished stories. Behind her, a new recruit. Maybe 21, wide-eyed asked, "Did you ever think this is where you'd end up?" Mira didn't look away from the wall. "I thought I'd end up forgotten. Are you scared of what's coming?" She turned, finally, her face unreadable. "I'm more afraid of what happens if no one comes next." National television. Feature special. The woman who opened the bag. Clips flashed. A replay of the lobby scene. Headlines spinning. Janitor unveils national cover-up. A voiceover. Mira Chun never raised her voice. She didn't need to. The host asked, "If you could speak to the Mira from a year ago, the one carrying that bag to the checkpoint, what would you say to her?" Mira sat still for a moment, then into the mic. "Don't flinch." The host nodded, visibly moved. "And what do you want people to remember about that day?" Mira leaned forward. "That when the truth fell out of that bag." She paused, steady. They didn't look away. Final scene, Washington, D.C., early morning. Mira stood on the same steps where the crowd had once gathered. The marble beneath her boots held the echo of the moment her silence ended. She wore a long coat against the wind. Her hair whipped around her face. She looked older, not in age but in gravity. Behind her, a new plaque was being installed in the lobby, in honor of those who risk silence to speak for the forgotten. Dedicated to whistleblowers, named and unnamed. Truth doesn't need permission. Mira Chen. A reporter stood nearby, waiting for one final quote. Any regrets? Mira looked out over the city. The sun was rising, clean, golden, defiant. Only that I didn't do it sooner. She turned, walked away, not toward anonymity, not toward power, but into something far more dangerous and far more lasting. Legacy. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.